The warm lights of the Carter family home spilled across the front lawn as expensive cars lined the driveway. Inside, laughter echoed through every room. Crystal glasses clinked together, while relatives celebrated Vanessa Carter's engagement to Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell, a respected naval officer with a promising future. Everyone seemed excited, everyone except Ethan. Standing quietly beside his aging pickup truck, Ethan adjusted the sleeves of his plain navy blue shirt before taking a slow breath. It had been nearly a year since he'd attended a family gathering. Experience had taught him these events rarely ended well. Still, his mother had called him personally. "Please come," she had said. "It would mean a lot to your father." Those words had convinced him. He carried a neatly wrapped gift toward the front door, hoping the evening might be different this time. It wasn't. The moment Vanessa spotted him, her smile faded. "Well," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "look who finally remembered he has a family." Several cousins chuckled. Ethan simply smiled. "Congratulations, Vanessa." She accepted the gift with one hand, barely looking at it. "I wasn't sure you'd be able to afford anything." Another wave of laughter rolled through the room. Ethan ignored it. "I hope you like it. I'm sure it's thoughtful," she replied with obvious sarcasm. Before he could answer, Ryan walked over wearing a sharp navy dress uniform. His posture reflected years of military discipline, but his smile was warm. "You must be Ethan," Ryan said, extending his hand. "I've heard a lot about you." Ethan shook it firmly. "I hope only the good things." Ryan laughed politely. "I try not to believe everything I hear." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, trust me, Ethan has always been the mysterious one. No career anyone understands. Never talks about work. Shows up once a year. We're still trying to figure out what he actually does." A few guests laughed again. Ethan answered calmly, "I work for the government." Vanessa burst into exaggerated laughter. "So does everyone who works at the DMV." The room erupted once more. Ryan noticed Ethan's calm expression. Most people would have become defensive. Ethan didn't. Instead, he quietly complimented the decorations and asked how long Ryan and Vanessa had been planning the engagement. Ryan appreciated the change in subject. Vanessa didn't. She wanted attention. She wanted comparisons. And most of all, she wanted everyone to see her successful life beside Ethan's ordinary one. Their parents soon entered the room. Their mother hugged Vanessa proudly before turning toward Ethan. "I'm glad you made it." "So am I." His father gave him a brief nod. "Still traveling for work?" "Quite a bit." "What kind of work?" "The kind I can't really discuss." Vanessa sighed dramatically. "There he goes again. Secret agent." One cousin joked, another laughed. "Maybe he's protecting office supplies." The room filled with laughter. Ethan simply smiled. Some secrets weren't his to tell. Years earlier, when he had left home at 18, everyone assumed he'd drift from one job to another. They never asked why he disappeared. They never asked why birthdays, holidays, and anniversaries were often missed. When they did ask, Ethan always gave the same answer: "I was deployed." They assumed it meant temporary government assignments. No one asked further. That was easier for everyone. As the evening continued, relatives surrounded Ryan, eager to hear stories about military life. Ryan answered every question with humility, careful not to exaggerate his accomplishments. Ethan listened quietly from across the room. Occasionally, Ryan caught himself looking toward Ethan. There was something unusual about him, his posture, his awareness of every entrance and exit, the way his eyes naturally scanned the room before settling back into relaxed conversation. Even his handshake had felt different, strong, controlled, confident, not the confidence of someone trying to impress people, the confidence of someone who no longer needed to. Ryan couldn't explain why, but something about Ethan reminded him of the senior instructors he'd admired during officer training. Meanwhile, Vanessa continued entertaining guests. She raised her glass. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight." Applause filled the room. She smiled proudly. "And I'd especially like to thank Ryan." Everyone cheered. He worked hard to become an officer, and unlike some people, she glanced directly at Ethan. He actually has something to show for it. The room grew awkwardly quiet before a few uncomfortable laughs broke the silence. Ethan lowered his eyes toward his untouched drink. He had heard worse during his years away. Words were easier to endure than the memories he carried. He looked around the room at the smiling faces of his family. None of them knew where he had truly spent the last 20 years. None of them knew about the sacrifices, the brothers he'd lost, or the promises he'd made. And if everything went according to plan, they never would. For Ethan Carter, protecting his country had never been about recognition. It had always been about duty. But before the night was over, a single unexpected encounter would change everything his family believed about the quiet man they had spent years calling a nobody. The evening grew livelier as more guests filled the Carter home. Waiters carried trays of appetizers through the crowd, while soft jazz played in the background. The backyard had been transformed into an elegant reception area with white lights hanging from the trees, fresh flowers decorating every table, and a small stage prepared for speeches and photographs. Vanessa couldn't have been happier. Everything looked perfect. Or at least it would, once she made sure everyone noticed the difference between her successful life and Ethan's ordinary one. "Ethan," she called loudly from across the patio. Dozens of conversations paused as he looked up. "Why don't you come sit at the family table?" He nodded politely and walked over. As he approached, Vanessa smiled sweetly, but there was a mischievous look in her eyes. "I saved you a special seat." When Ethan reached the table, he realized the only chair left was tucked into the far corner beside a serving station, away from the rest of the family. Every other guest was seated near the center. A few cousins exchanged amused glances. Ethan simply pulled out the chair and sat down without complaint. Ryan noticed the arrangement. He leaned toward Vanessa and whispered, "We could make room for him over here." Vanessa shook her head. "He's fine." Ryan frowned but chose not to argue during the celebration. Dinner was served and conversations soon turned toward careers and accomplishments. One uncle proudly described his business expansion. A cousin talked about graduating from medical school. Another relative celebrated receiving a promotion. Then Vanessa smiled as everyone's attention shifted toward Ethan. "So, big brother," she asked with exaggerated curiosity, "what exactly do you do these days?" Every eye turned toward him. Ethan calmly set down his fork. "I work in government service." Vanessa laughed. "That's the same answer you've given for years." "It happens to be true, but what kind of government job?" "I'm afraid I can't discuss it." She leaned back dramatically. "There he goes again." Several guests laughed. "Oh, come on." One cousin joked, "We're family." Ethan smiled politely. "I know, so tell us." "I really can't." Vanessa folded her arms. "You know what I think." He remained silent. "I think you don't want anyone to know because your job isn't impressive." A few relatives nodded. Someone muttered, "Makes sense." Vanessa continued, "Meanwhile, Ryan serves our country proudly. He's earned every medal he wears." She looked proudly toward her fiancé. "Now that's something to admire." Ryan smiled politely but felt increasingly uncomfortable. He respected military service, but he disliked seeing anyone humiliated, especially someone who never fought back. "Ethan," Ryan asked kindly, "have you ever worked with the Navy?" Ethan looked at him for a moment. "From time to time." "What department?" I'm sorry. Ryan nodded. I understand. Vanessa rolled her eyes. You actually believe him, Ryan answered carefully. Some government positions do require confidentiality. She laughed. Or maybe he's just embarrassed. More laughter followed. Their mother quietly changed the subject, asking everyone about dessert. But Vanessa wasn't finished. When the photographer gathered the family for pictures, she intentionally positioned Ethan at the edge of the group. Stand over there, she instructed. Why? So the important people can be in the center. The words stung more than Ethan expected. Still, he quietly stepped aside. The flash of the camera captured smiling faces. Everyone looked joyful. Except Ethan. Later, Ryan walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee. Mind if I join you? Not at all. They sat in silence for a moment. I'm sorry about earlier. Ryan finally said, You don't owe me an apology. I know what it's like when families say things they shouldn't. Ethan smiled faintly. You seem like a good man. Ryan chuckled. I try. He studied Ethan for a moment. Can I ask you something? Of course. Have we met before? I don't believe so. Ryan frowned thoughtfully. You just seem familiar. Ethan laughed softly. I get that sometimes. Before Ryan could ask another question, a convoy of black government SUVs slowly entered the driveway. Several guests turned toward the entrance. The music faded. Uniformed personnel stepped out first, followed by several senior naval officers wearing decorated dress uniforms. The conversations around the party stopped almost instantly. Ryan stood up in surprise. What are they doing here? Vanessa looked equally confused. I didn't invite anyone that senior. One by one, the officers entered the backyard with calm, professional expressions. Leading them was Admiral James Walker, a respected flag officer known throughout the Navy. Every military guest immediately stood at attention out of respect. Ryan straightened his uniform instinctively. The Admiral greeted a few guests politely before his eyes scanned the crowd. Then he stopped. His expression changed completely. Without hesitation, he walked past the family, ignored the decorated stage, and headed directly toward the quiet man standing alone near the edge of the patio. Ethan calmly set down his coffee. Ryan watched in complete confusion. Vanessa whispered, Why is he walking toward my brother? The Admiral stopped only a few feet from Ethan. For a brief moment, the entire party fell silent. Every conversation ended. Every eye turned toward the 2 men. No one could have imagined that the next few seconds were about to shatter everything Vanessa believed about the brother she had spent years calling a nobody. An uneasy silence settled over the engagement party as Admiral James Walker stood face to face with Ethan Carter. More than 100 guests watched without speaking. Even the musicians had stopped playing, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. Vanessa folded her arms and forced a nervous laugh. This has to be some kind of mistake. No one answered. The Admiral's expression was calm, but his posture carried unmistakable respect. Without hesitation, he came to full attention and delivered a sharp military salute. His voice rang clearly across the backyard. Good evening, Commander Carter. It's an honor to see you again, sir. A wave of whispers swept through the crowd. Commander, did he just say, sir? Ryan's eyes widened. He instinctively stood straighter, recognizing the respect in the Admiral's tone. This was not the greeting of a superior officer to a subordinate. It was one professional honoring another. Ethan returned the salute with quiet confidence. Good evening, Admiral. It's been a while. It certainly has, sir. Vanessa stared in disbelief before forcing another laugh. Ryan, tell them there's a mix-up. My brother isn't a commander. He barely tells anyone what he does. Ryan didn't respond. Instead, he kept looking at Ethan. trying to understand why one of the Navy's most respected admirals would greet him with such honor. The admiral turned toward Ryan. Lieutenant Mitchell. Yes, Admiral. You know Commander Ethan Carter. Ryan glanced between the two men. I know him as my fiancé's brother. The admiral smiled faintly. Then today you've learned something most people never do. Vanessa stepped forward impatiently. Can someone please explain what's happening? The admiral looked at Ethan. Sir, with your permission. Ethan paused for a moment before nodding. You may share only what's already public. Understood. The admiral faced the gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, Commander Ethan Carter served our nation for more than 2 decades in one of its most demanding military communities. Much of his career remains classified, so I cannot discuss operational details. But I can tell you this, his leadership, courage, and service have earned the respect of everyone who has had the privilege of working with him. The backyard fell completely silent. Vanessa's confident smile disappeared. She slowly looked at Ethan, searching for any sign that this was a joke. There wasn't one. Ryan swallowed hard. Sir, are you saying Commander Carter served in naval special warfare? The admiral nodded once. He did. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. During officer training, instructors often spoke about leaders whose decisions had saved lives under impossible circumstances. Many names were never discussed outside professional circles, but Commander Ethan Carter was one that officers were taught to respect. Ryan had never imagined that the quiet man, sitting alone in the corner all evening, was the same officer. Almost without thinking, Ryan came to attention and saluted Ethan. Commander Carter, it's an honor to meet you, sir. Ethan returned the salute. At ease, Lieutenant. Ryan lowered his hand, still struggling to process everything. I had no idea. I know. Ethan replied gently. Most people don't. Vanessa looked from Ryan to the Admiral. Why didn't anyone know? Why didn't he tell us? Ethan answered calmly. Because my work was never about being recognized. But we thought. You thought I had nothing to show for my life. No one argued. The words hung heavily in the air. Their father lowered his head in shame. Their mother covered her mouth with trembling hands. Years of assumptions suddenly felt painfully unfair. The cousins who had laughed at Ethan earlier avoided looking him in the eye. Ryan stepped closer. Sir, if I may say something. Ethan nodded. You've already earned the respect of every officer here. You never needed to prove yourself tonight. Ethan gave a humble smile. I wasn't trying to. The Admiral glanced around the gathering. True leaders rarely announce who they are. They let their actions speak for them. Vanessa felt tears forming in her eyes. She remembered every joke, every insult, every time she had called her brother a failure, simply because he never defended himself. Now she understood why. He hadn't been hiding from success. He had been protecting responsibilities that demanded silence. As the realization spread through the crowd, admiration replaced mockery. The same guests who had laughed only minutes earlier now looked at Ethan with profound respect. And for the first time in many years, the Carter family began to see the quiet man among them not as a nobody, but as someone whose greatest achievements had never required applause. For several long moments no one spoke. The backyard that had been filled with laughter only minutes earlier now stood in complete silence. Every guest seemed to be replaying the evening in their minds. The jokes, the whispers, the mocking smiles directed at Ethan Carter. Nothing could erase what had happened. Vanessa slowly stepped toward her brother. The confidence she had carried all evening was gone. Her eyes were red and her hands trembled as she struggled to find the right words. Ethan, she whispered. He turned to face her with the same calm expression he had worn throughout the night. I'm so sorry. Her voice cracked. I spent years treating you like you were a failure. I judged you because you never talked about your life. I thought you were embarrassed because you hadn't accomplished anything." She lowered her head, but all this time, "You were serving our country while I was making fun of you." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I don't know how to make this right." Ethan looked at his younger sister for a moment before offering a gentle smile. "You start by never judging someone's worth by what you can see." Vanessa nodded, unable to speak. Their mother stepped forward next. Tears filled her eyes as she wrapped her arms around Ethan. "I'm sorry, son," she said through sobs. "We should have trusted you. We complained every time you missed Christmas, birthdays, and family dinners. We never stopped to ask whether you had a reason." His father followed, his voice heavy with regret. "I thought you were avoiding the family. I didn't realize you were carrying responsibilities you couldn't talk about." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on his father's shoulder. "I never wanted recognition. I only wanted you to know that I never stopped loving this family." Those words broke the last of the tension. Ryan approached Ethan and stood at attention once more. "Commander Carter, before tonight I admired you because of what Admiral Walker said. Now I admire you for something even greater." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "And what's that?" "You never used your achievements to make anyone feel small, even the people who tried to make you feel that way." Ethan smiled warmly. "My uniform never defined who I was. It only reflected a responsibility I accepted." Ryan extended his hand. "Thank you for your service, sir." Ethan shook it firmly. "And thank you for yours, Lieutenant. Keep leading with integrity." "I will, sir." Around them, several military guests quietly came to attention. One after another, they saluted Ethan, not because they had been ordered to, but because they genuinely respected the man standing before them. Ethan acknowledged each salute with quiet humility. The guests who had laughed earlier now approached him one by one. "I'm sorry," one cousin admitted. "I judged you without knowing you," another said. An uncle who had mocked Ethan's mysterious job lowered his eyes. "I owe you an apology." Ethan accepted every apology with grace. "What's done is done," he replied. "Let's focus on treating each other better from this day forward." Admiral Walker smiled proudly. "Commander Carter, after all these years, you still teach the most important lesson." Ethan looked at him curiously. "And what's that?" "That true leaders don't demand respect. They earn it through character." As the evening drew to a close, the atmosphere had completely changed. Conversations were no longer about ranks, medals, or careers. Instead, families gathered around Ethan, asking about his travels, his interests, and the simple moments of life he had missed. For the first time in years, they wanted to know the man, not the title. Before leaving, Ethan picked up the small gift he had brought for Vanessa. She looked at it with tearful eyes. "I never even opened it." "You should." Inside the box was a beautifully engraved silver picture frame. Beneath the glass was a handwritten note. "Family isn't measured by success. It's measured by love, forgiveness, and standing together when life becomes difficult. Congratulations on your new beginning. Love, Ethan." Vanessa broke into tears once again. She hugged her brother tightly. "I promise I'll spend the rest of my life deserving a brother like you." Ethan returned the embrace. "You don't have to be perfect, just be kind." As he quietly walked toward the driveway, every military officer present, including Ryan and Admiral Walker, stood at attention and rendered one final salute. The guests watched in respectful silence. Only then did the Carter family truly understand that the quiet man they had called a nobody had never needed applause to prove his worth. His greatest victory was not the respect he earned that night. It was choosing forgiveness over revenge and reminding everyone that true honor is revealed through humility, sacrifice, and unwavering character.